The savage human terrifies the shy alien diplomat, but he can't resist the attraction. Welcome to today's episode of Sci-Fi Humanity. Get ready for an exhilarating tale where politics, passion, and peril collide. Our story. So this is a human warship. Follows the shy alien diplomat, Ambassador Eloia Kelara, as she faces the terrifying yet irresistibly attractive human commander Tykus Raven. Tensions are high, stakes are even higher, and somewhere in the midst of it all, an unexpected connection forms. Stay tuned for a journey you won't forget. Ambassador Eloia Kelara nervously smoothed her shimmering golden gown as the shuttle approached the imposing human warship. Indomitable she had always been, a shy and reserved diplomat, more comfortable with quiet negotiations than bold confrontations, but with tensions between the Solar Lava Confederacy and Earth at an all-time high. She had no choice but to face humanity's representatives head in. As the shuttle docked and the airlock hissed open, Eloia took a deep breath. Steeling herself, she stepped out into the hangar bed, her emerald skin flushing darker with anxiety as she took in the sight of the human honor guard awaiting her. Her gaze was immediately drawn to the two men at the forefront. One was an older, distinguished-looking gentleman in a crisp suit, his salt and pepper hair neatly trimmed Secretary of Interstellar Relations, Alexander Romanov. She recognized from her briefings, but it was the other man who made her heart race with a mix of fear and something far more unsettling. He was tall and powerfully built, with elf features and piercing blue eyes that seemed to see straight through her. He wore a high-tech combat exoskeleton that only emphasized his raw, savage masculinity. Commander Tykus Raven, the Butcher of Bloody Gulch. Eloia had to fight the urge to shrink back under his intense gaze, a shiver running through her. This man was a legend, a brutal warrior known for his ruthless efficiency on the battlefield. What was he doing at a diplomatic summit? Secretary Romanov stepped forward with a polite smile. Ambassador Kelara, welcome aboard the Indomitable. Thank you for agreeing to this meeting. Of course, Secretary Romanov. Eloia replied, proud of how steady she kept her voice. I hope we can find a path to peace between our peoples, Commander. Raven let out a low, dismissive snort, making Eloia flinch. Peace, he rumbled, his deep voice sending a traitorous thrill down her spine. That's a pretty word, but we all know this is about the core lava finally learning their place. Eloia bristled at his words, even as a part of her quailed at the sheer arrogant confidence he radiated. Commander Raven, she said coolly, I assure you the Kaiser Lava Confederacy has no intention of simply rolling over for Earth's demands. We are here to negotiate in good faith. Raven's lips curled in a smile that was more predatory than amused. We'll see about that, little ambassador. I think you'll find the Indomitable has a way of changing perspectives. With that, turned on his heel and strode away, leaving Eloia feeling distinctly off balance. Romanov gave her an apologetic look. You must forgive the commander's bluntness. Ambassador, he's a soldier, not a diplomat. Shall we proceed to the negotiation room? Eloia could only nod, following the secretary on unsteady legs. She couldn't shake the feeling that she had just walked into the den of a savage beast, a beast with piercing blue eyes and a smile that made her knees weak in her heart race. Goddess help her, this was going to be even more difficult than she had feared. How was she supposed to stand strong for her people when just being in Tykus Raven's presence made her feel like a flustered schoolgirl? She could only pray that she would find the strength and composure she needed. The fate of the Solar Lava Confederacy hung in the balance. The negotiation room was surprisingly comfortable, with plush chairs and a gleaming conference table, but Eloia barely noticed the amenities. Her attention focused on the two men seated across from her. Secretary Romanov was all polite smiles and diplomatic platitudes, but Commander Raven lounged in his chair like a predator at rest, his gaze never leaving Eloia. She shifted uncomfortably, feeling like a mouse under the eye of a hawk. Ambassador Kelara, Romanov began, I think we can all agree that the current tensions between our peoples are untenable. Earth deeply desires a peaceful resolution, but we must address the Sorva Confederacy's continued aggression and expansionism. Eloia took a deep breath, trying to ignore Raven's unsettling presence. Secretary Romanov, I must protest. The Kaiser Lava are not the aggressors here. We are simply defending our sovereign territory from human encroachment. Raven let out a harsh bark of laughter. Is that what you call it, defending your territory like you defended it at Bloody Gulch Eloia paled, her hands trembling. Slightly atop the table, the mere mention of that awful battle made her feel ill. So much death, so much destruction, Commander Raven, I hardly think she began. But he cut her off with a sharp gesture. No, let's talk about Bloody Gulch, Ambassador. Let's talk about how your elite warriors slaughtered innocent human civilians, men, women, children, butchered them in the streets. His voice was low and controlled, but Eloia could hear the rage simmering beneath the surface. She swallowed hard, forcing herself to meet his burning gaze. What happened at Bloody Gulch was a tragedy, she said softly, one at the core. Lava deeply regret, but it was not an act of aggression, Commander. It was a terrible mistake, a misunderstanding that escalated out of control. Raven surged to his feet, looming over her. A misunderstanding, he snarled. Is that what you call it when your soldiers paint the streets red with human blood? Elfish shrank back in her chair, her heart hammering against her ribs. She had never felt so small, so vulnerable as she did in the face of this human's raw savage fury. Please, Commander, she whispered, hating the tremor in her voice. I am not here to defend the indefensible. I am here to find a way forward for both our peoples. For a long, tense moment, Raven stared down at her, his jaw clenched and his eyes hard. Then, slowly, he retook his seat, some of the rage leaching from his posture. Fine, he bit out. Let's find a way forward, Ambassador. But no, this Earth will not tolerate any further lava aggression. If your people step out of line again, we will end you permanently. Eloia could only nod, her throat too tight for words. Secretary Romanov cleared his throat, breaking the heavy silence. Perhaps it would be best if we adjourn for now, he suggested diplomatically. We can reconvene tomorrow, after we've all had a chance to rest and reflect. Eloia seized on the reprieve like a lifeline. Yes, I think that would be wise. Thank you, Secretary. She rose on shaky legs, barely registering Romanov's polite farewell as she fled the room. It wasn't until she was safely back in her quarters, the door sealed shut behind her, that she allowed herself to collapse, her whole body trembling. Tykus Raven terrified her, his raw power, his barely leashed rage, the way he looked at her, like he could see straight into her soul. It was too much. How was she supposed to negotiate with a man like that? And yet, even as she huddled there on the floor, trying to slow her racing heart, a small traitorous part of her couldn't help but remember the way his eyes had blazed with passion, the way his voice had rumbled through her like distant thunder. Goddess help her, but some dark, secret part of her was drawn to him, attracted to his savage intensity, his barely tamed ferocity. What was wrong with her? She was a diplomat, not some love-struck fool. She couldn't afford to be distracted by base desires, not when her people were counting on her. But even as she told herself that, Eloia knew it was a losing battle. Tykus Raven had gotten under her skin, and try as she might, she couldn't shake him loose. All she could do was pray for strength and hope that somehow she could find a way to make peace with the humans before they destroyed the soil lava, or before Tykus Raven destroyed her. The next few days passed in a blur of tense negotiations and uneasy meetings. Secretary Romanov remained unfailingly polite, but Commander Raven seemed to take every opportunity to unsettle Eloia, his mere presence sending her heart racing and her concentration scattering. He would loom behind her as she pored over star charts, his heat and scent enveloping her until she could barely think. He would brush past her in the narrow corridors, his armor barely grazing her skin, leaving her flushed and flustered. And always he watched her with those piercing blue eyes like a predator's stalking its prey. It was driving Eloia to distraction, and she feared it was beginning to show. Her arguments lacked their usual sharpness, her counterpoints coming a beat too slow. She could feel the negotiations slipping away from her, Earth's demands growing more and more unreasonable. But what could she do? She was a diplomat trained to use words and reason as her weapons. How could she hope to stand against a man like Tykus Raven, who seemed to embody raw savage force? It All came to a head one evening as Eloia sat in her quarters trying to massage away a pounding headache. A chime at the door startled her, and she rose wearily to answer it, expecting Secretary Romanov with yet another list of demands. But when the door slid open, it was Commander Raven who stood there filling the doorway with his bulk. Elia's heart leaped into her throat, and she took an involuntary step back. "Commander Raven," she said, hating the breathless quality of her voice. "What are you doing here?" He stepped inside without waiting for an invitation, the door sliding shut behind him with a hiss that sounded ominous in the sudden quiet. "I think it's time for a little chat, Ambassador," he said, his deep voice sending shivers down her spine. "Just you and me, no diplomats or politicians to muddy the waters." Eloia swallowed hard, her mouth gone dry. I don't think that's appropriate, Commander. We should keep our discussions to the negotiation table." Raven let out a low, dark chuckle, stalking closer to her. "Always so proper, aren't you, Ambassador? Always hiding behind your rules and your protocols. But I see through you." He was close now, so close she could feel the heat radiating off his armor, smell the musk of his skin beneath the sharp tang of metal and circuitry. Elia's heart raced, her skin prickling with a heady mix of fear and something far more dangerous. "I don't know what you mean," she whispered, her back hitting the wall as she retreated before him. There was nowhere left to run, nowhere to hide from the intensity of his gaze. "Don't you?" Raven braced one armored arm against the wall beside her head, caging her. "And I've seen the way you look at me, Eloia, the way your breath catches when I'm near, the way your pulse races beneath your skin." His other hand came up, a single armored finger tracing the delicate line of her jaw. Eloia shuddered, her eyes fluttering shut of their own accord. "You're attracted to me," Raven murmured, his breath hot against her ear. "Terrified, yes, but also attracted. Don't bother denying it." Eloia swallowed convulsively, trying to gather the tattered shreds of her composure. "It doesn't matter what I feel, Commander. We can't. Our peoples." His finger pressed gently against her lips, silencing her. "Forget our peoples. Just for a moment. This is about you and me, Eloia. This thing between us." His hands slid into her hair, his armored fingers surprisingly gentle as they cradled the back of her head. Elia's heart thundered in her chest, her whole body trembling with a mix of terror and anticipation. "Tell me you don't want this," Raven whispered, his lips a hair's breadth from hers. "Tell me to stop and I will, but if you want me even a little bit, then be brave, my shy little ambassador. Take what you want." Eloia knew she should push him away, knew she should scream or slap him or knee him in the groin. He was the enemy, a savage brute who had slaughtered her people. She should hate him, but God as helper, she didn't. In that moment, all she wanted was to feel his lips on hers, his hands on her skin. All she wanted was him. "Tykus," she breathed. And then his mouth was on hers, hot and hungry and demanding. Eloia moaned, her arms coming up to wrap around his neck, her fingers tangling in his short hair. He growled against her lips, his armored body pressing her into the wall as he claimed her mouth, his tongue invading, conquering, possessing. It was madness, it was ecstasy, it was everything Eloia had ever wanted, and everything she had never dared to dream of. The shy, reserved Diplomat melted away, replaced by a woman of fire and passion, a woman who met Tykus Raven's savage intensity with her own armor and clothing, fell away forgotten as they lost themselves in each other. And there, in the heart of the enemy ship, Eloia surrendered to the desperate, aching need that had consumed her from the moment she first laid eyes on the savage, beautiful human male. Tomorrow there would be consequences. Tomorrow she would have to face the reality of what she had done, the betrayal of her people and her duty. But tonight she was his, and he was hers, and nothing else mattered. Eloia awoke slowly, her body aching in places she hadn't known existed for a moment. She couldn't remember where she was or why she felt so deliciously sore. Then it all came rushing back, the negotiations. Tykus Raven's sudden appearance in her quarters, the way he had taken her against the wall, on the bed, on every surface imaginable, the way she had begged for more, her shyness and reserve Burned away by the sheer savage force of his passion, Eloia sat up with a gasp, clutching the sheet to her bare chest. What had she done? She had betrayed her people, her duty, everything she believed in, and for what? A night of forbidden pleasure with a human brute beside her. Tykus stirred, his eyes blinking open. He looked different in the morning light, his chiseled features softened by sleep, his blue eyes hazy and warm, almost vulnerable. Morning, he rumbled, his voice rough with sleep. He reached for her, but Eloia flinched away, shame and guilt flooding through her. This was a mistake, she whispered, unable to meet his gaze. I shouldn't have. Tykus sat up, his brow furrowing. Eloia, no. She shook her head, blinking back sudden tears. Don't, please, I can't do this. Tykus, I'm a diplomat, an ambassador. My duty is to my people, not to my own selfish desires. She forced herself to look at him, to meet his piercing gaze. Head on. Last night was incredible, but it can't happen again. We have to focus on the negotiations, on finding a way to make peace between our peoples. Anything else is a distraction we can't afford. For a long moment, Tykus just looked at her, his expression unreadable. Then, slowly, he nodded. You're right, he said, his voice carefully neutral. The negotiations are what matter. We can't let personal feelings get in the way of that. Personal feelings was that all this was to him. Elia's heart clenched, but she forced herself to nod, to keep her expression calm and professional. I'm glad we understand each other, Commander Raven, she said, hating the way her voice wavered slightly on his name. I should go. Secretary Romanov will be expecting me. She could feel Tykus watching her, his gaze heavy on her bare skin. But she refused to look at him. If she did, she feared her resolve would crumble, that she would throw herself back into his arms and damn the consequences. Somehow she managed to dress herself, her fingers fumbling with the fastenings of her gown. She was just reaching for her combs when Tykus spoke, his voice low and intense. Eloia. She froze, rose her heart stuttering in her chest. Slowly she turned to face him, steeling herself for what she might see in his eyes. But what she saw there made her breath catch in her throat. It wasn't anger or indifference or even lust. It was tenderness, understanding, and beneath that a fierce, unwavering determination. I know you're scared, he owned. I know you think this is a betrayal of your duty, your people. But Eloia, what if it's not? What if this thing between us, what if it's the key to bringing our peoples together? Eloia stared at him, hardly daring to breathe. What do you mean? Tykus rose from the bed, heedless of his own nudity. He crossed to her in 2 long strides, his hands coming up to cradle her face with a gentleness that made her heart ache. Think about it, he urged, his thumb brushing lightly over her cheekbone. You and me were proof that humans and sour lava can come together, can find common ground. If we can do it, why can't our peoples? Elia's mind raced, her heart pounding in her chest. Could he be right? Could their forbidden attraction really hold the key to peace between their warring races? I don't know, she whispered, her voice trembling. It's too much, Tykus. I'm just one person, and I'm just a man, he said firmly. A man who's tired of war, tired of the endless bloodshed and hatred. A man who's found something worth fighting for in you. Elia's breath hitched, her eyes stinging with sudden tears. Tykus, I know it won't be easy, he said, his forehead coming to rest gently against hers. I know there will be obstacles, opposition from both our peoples, but Altha, I believe in this, in us, and I'm willing to fight for it. If you are. For a long moment Eloia couldn't speak past the lump in her throat. Her mind whirled with the enormity of what he was proposing, the risks and the challenges, and the sheer dizzying possibility of it all. But in the end, there was only one answer she could give, only one path forward for her and for her people. Yes, she whispered, her hands coming up to cover his where they cradled her face. Yes, Tykus, I'm with you. We'll fight for this, for us, and for the future of both our peoples. The smile that broke across his face was blinding in its intensity, fierce and joyous and full of promise. He surged forward, claiming her mouth in a kiss that seared her to her very soul, sealing their pact with the fire of his passion. There would be struggles ahead, Eloia, new moments of doubt and fear of opposition from those who clung to the old hatreds, but in that moment wrapped in Tykus Raven's arms, she felt invincible, unafraid, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. As long as he was by her side, together they would forge a new path, a new future for humans, and Lava, alike a future built not on war and bloodshed, but on understanding, compassion, and love. It wouldn't be easy. But then nothing worth fighting forever was, and as Eloia surrendered herself once more to the fierce, tender passion of her human warrior, she knew that this was worth fighting for, no matter the cost. The great hall was packed to the rafters. Humans and Kerala alike gathered to witness the historic moment. A hush fell over the crowd as Ambassador Eloia Kelara and Commander Tykus Raven stepped up to the podium. Hand in hand, gone were the days of enmity and mistrust between their peoples in the months since that fateful negotiation. Aboard the indomitable Eloia, and Tykus had worked tirelessly to bridge the gap between human and Soar Lava, to forge a new alliance based on mutual understanding and respect. It hadn't been easy. There had been setbacks, moments when the old hatreds threatened to rear their ugly heads once more, but through it all they had stood strong, united in their love for each other and their determination to create a better future for all. And now at last, their hard work had paid off. The treaty lay on the podium before them, waiting only for the signatures of the Earth Ambassador in the Kesar Lava High Counselor to seal a new era of peace and cooperation between their peoples. Eloia looked out over the sea of faces, her heart swelling with emotion. Beside her, Tykus squeezed her hand, his strength and support a steadying presence at her side. "My friends," Eloia began, her voice ringing out clear and strong, "today we stand on the brink of a new beginning, a future where humans and Soar Lava stand not as enemies, but as allies, as family." A murmur ran through the crowd, a ripple of hope and excitement. Eloia smiled, her eyes finding Tykus, seeing the love and pride shining there. "It has not been an easy road," she continued, "but nothing worth having ever is, and this alliance, this bond between our peoples, it is worth everything, worth fighting for, worth sacrificing for, worth believing in." As the Earth Ambassador and the Core Lava High Counselor stepped forward to sign the treaty, Eloia and Tykus watched with hearts full of pride and joy. They may not have had the authority to sign the document themselves, but they knew that their love, their determination had been the driving force behind this historic moment. And as the final signatures were penned and the hall erupted in cheers, Tykus drew Eloia into his arms, his forehead resting gently against hers. "We did, oh my love," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. "We changed the course of history." Eloia smiled up at him, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "We did. But you know there's still one more treaty to be signed." Tykus raised an eyebrow, a playful smirk tugging at his lips. "Oh, and what treaty might that be?" Elia's smile turned mischievous. "Why, the treaty our hearts, of course. The one where you promise to love me, cherish me, and put up with my diplomatic nitpicking for the rest of our days." Tykus laughed, the sound rich and warm and full of love. "That's a treaty I'll sign gladly, my fierce little ambassador, but only if you promise to love me, challenge me, and keep me on my toes until the stars burn out." "It's a deal, my savage warrior," Eloia whispered, sealing their pact with a kiss that held the promise of a lifetime. And there, amidst the celebrations of a new era of peace, Eloia and Tykus held each other close, their laughter mingling as they looked forward to a future filled with love, adventure, in the unshakable bond between two hearts that had dared to dream of the impossible. A future where anything was possible as long as they faced it together. And that, dear viewers, concludes our story of Ambassador Eloia Kelara and Commander Tykus Raven. From fear and distrust to an unbreakable bond, their journey was one of courage, sacrifice, and love. Who knew that the key to peace between two warring species would be found in the most unexpected place? If you enjoyed this story, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more thrilling tales. Thank you for watching, and remember, sometimes the most savage battles lead to the most beautiful alliances. Until next time.